Cleopatra had consolidated her power on the throne of Egypt, and under her administration, Egypt prospered and the city of Alexandria experienced a cultural boom financed by the queen. Cleopatra organized an expedition to Rome. In the city, she stayed at Julius Caesar's mansion. The Egyptian queen took her son Caesarion in the voyage, the fruit of her union with the Roman general. Julius Caesar was at the height of his power and, as the leader of his nation, made several political and social reforms. He also organized a triumph in his own honor. The parade of Caesar had the presence of Arisine, Cleopatra's sister, displayed as a prisoner, symbol of Rome's victory over the Egyptians. Caesar introduced the city to the Egyptian queen, but at the time, Rome did not yet have the glory that brought it into history. It was not yet comparable to Alexandria, the capital of Ptolemaic Egypt. Caesar's relationship with the foreigner was frowned upon by the Roman elite. There were a lot of rumors and lies about the couple. Caesar was named dictator in perpetuity and had an unrivaled power. The Roman senators were left without much of their influence and feared losing their remaining power. So they conspired against Caesar's life. In 44 BC, Julius Caesar was murdered by Roman politicians in a Senate session. Chaos engulfed Rome. General Mark Antony, Caesar's right-hand man, pursued the conspirators. In a public square, he read Caesar's will, where his son with Cleopatra was not among the heirs. In his will, Caesar indicated his nephew Octavius as his successor. Rome was no longer a safe place for the Egyptian queen, and she returned to her kingdom. Meanwhile, Octavius and Mark Antony led their armies in the persecution of the men who betrayed Caesar. There was a remarkable encounter between Cleopatra and Mark Antony. In the year 41, he sent a messenger to Alexandria. Through this man, he called the queen for a meeting in Tarsus, a city located in present-day Turkey. The Egyptian queen arrived at the agreed place in a dazzling boat. The ship had a stern made of gold, its oars were made of silver, and the sails were purple. The navigation was accompanied by music. Fife, lyre, and flute were played. The queen, beautiful and ornated, was freshened up by her servants, and the boat had a wonderful smell. The entire population left their duties to follow Cleopatra's triumphal arrival. Mark Antony fell in love with her immediately. Still, in 41 BC, Cleopatra invited the mighty Mark Antony to visit Alexandria. However, after spending some time in the Egyptian city and getting involved with the queen, the Roman left and the two continued to exchange correspondence. The couple only met again after a long time, but before that reunion, something happened. In 40 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to twins, recognized by Mark Antony himself as their heirs. The children were called Helios, a Greek origin, which means sun, and Selene, which means moon. During the absence of the Roman, where he was separated from the Egyptian queen, he even resumed his relationship with his wife Fulvia in Rome, although he could not forget Cleopatra. Fulvia eventually died, which may have made things easier and made it possible for Mark Antony to finally join Cleopatra once again. But Octavius, Julius Caesar's nephew, did not want that to happen. He suggested that his sister, Octavia, should marry the Roman general. That happened, and they had 3 kids in 2 years. Mark Antony, after Caesar's death, became consul general. Later, his power was divided between him, Octavius, and Lepidus, a political association known as the Second Triumvirate. Lepidus distanced himself from political life, which led to a dispute between Octavius and Mark Antony. The power in Rome was divided between the two. Caesar's nephew ruled the west, while Mark Antony managed the eastern provinces. Although he was married, and even against Octavius's will, the romance between Mark Antony and Cleopatra was not over. They met again in the city of Antioch, where they made their union official. The romance between the two was thriving, and they both seemed in love in Alexandria. The couple had many parties and banquets where they displayed their sovereignty. However, the Roman was forced to leave Egypt after an attack by the Parthians in Syria and Asia Minor, the inhabitants of the Parthian Empire in ancient Persia. Octavius reproved this union and was frustrated by the relationship between the Roman and the mighty Egyptian. In part, this was due to his sister Octavia, who ended up rejected by Mark Antony, and also for fear of losing part of the Roman Empire to the couple. A new civil war broke out in Rome between the supporters of Mark Antony and the defenders of Octavius. The Battle of Actium happened in 31 BC in a region in Greece where both faced each other. Cleopatra accompanied her husband as he headed towards the long battle. But when the defeat of Mark Antony was already visible, she returned to Egypt, quietly announcing a false triumph. Octavius achieved a decisive victory in the naval battle of Actium, and this victory marked the end of the Roman Republic and the beginning of the imperial period. However, his opponents eventually discovered the truth, while Cleopatra tried to maintain her position and conquer allies. She did everything she could so that together with Mark Antony, they could rise again. But he, after defeat, was no longer the same person. Octavius said he would forgive Cleopatra if she killed her lover. Ignoring the proposal, the Egyptian queen continued to try to motivate her husband, while she tried to discover, together with her personal physician, a painless poison. The queen was preparing for the worst. The end of Mark Antony was tragic. While Cleopatra tried to flee from Octavius and his army, who had already arrived in Alexandria, the Roman soldier received the news that his lover had died. Desperate, he took his sword and wounded his own chest. However, the strike was not accurate and Mark Antony did not die immediately. While he was bleeding and suffering from the pain caused by the blow, he was informed that Cleopatra was still alive and managed to find the Egyptian monarch. His last breath happened in the arms of his lover. When he reached his other half, Mark Antony had already lost a lot of blood, and there was nothing that could save his life. Before dying, however, in the arms of his beloved Cleopatra, he asked her to collaborate with his opponent Octavius in order to save herself. After this request, the great Roman Mark Antony died. Caesarion, Caesar's heir sometime later, was also killed by Octavian. At that time, at funerals, it was common for women to hurt themselves with punches and scratches, accompanied by cries of pain and despair. That's what Cleopatra did in front of his late lover. Her injuries caused an infection, and she received treatment on the orders of Octavius. However, the queen, shaken by the death of her beloved Mark Antony and afraid of the future, tried to resist the treatment so that she could die. But Octavius terrorized her with threats to her children. Cleopatra gave in and, out of love for the heirs, accepted the proper treatment until she recovered her health. Cleopatra also had an impactful end. It was one of the events that eternalized her in history. The queen failed to escape her rival Octavius, who had arrested her in Alexandria, but she resisted and would not surrender to the enemy, going through the humiliation of being a prisoner and hostage of Rome. That would be too embarrassing for a woman like her. As for her sons, Caesarion was murdered, as was said, and the others were taken to Rome to be raised by Octavia. Cleopatra was constantly watched over by order of Octavius, since she had attempted suicide twice after the death of Mark Antony. But Octavius's plans didn't go as expected. The queen, always cunning, put an end to her own life. Before that, she sent a letter to Octavius in which she asked to be buried next to her late husband. In relation to her death, some sources say that she was voluntarily bitten by a serpent and died from the poison. Other sources and scholars affirm that Cleopatra took some poison. With these uncertainties, her end is quite controversial. Some sources say Cleopatra's personal physician had a great deal of knowledge about poisons. Besides, the queen was always a strategist and effective person. Most likely, she prepared her death in advance. Finally, even though the most famous version is the one that states that Cleopatra died while being deliberately bitten by a serpent, it's more likely she ingested some lethal poison, which did not cause major discomfort at the time of her death. She was found on top of a couch, dressed in beautiful garments. People claim that she had a serene expression. She died 9 days after the death of her lover. Her funeral was solemn and elegant, worthy of an Egyptian queen. Her request to be buried next to Mark Antony was respected. After the death of the powerful monarch, Egypt became a Roman province. It was the end of the hegemony of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt. Cleopatra's story is fascinating. Many of her female ancestors were important Egyptian rulers along with their husbands. Curiously, Egyptian women at that time had more freedom than women from other civilizations. Cleopatra did not play a secondary role in this lineage of women rulers and was a renowned figure. Her life journey was particularly hectic and impressive in many ways. Firstly, the Ptolemaic lineage, which is impressive due to the number of murders among the family members themselves. This habit, indeed, was inherited by Cleopatra. But regardless of these murders, the Ptolemaic government was very important to Egypt, and Cleopatra had major responsibilities and had to make important decisions throughout her life as ruler of Egypt. She had admirers and rivals. She was skillful, proactive, and extremely influential. She was a rare, special, quite determined woman. She always had strategies to achieve all her goals. Cleopatra marveled everyone because of her great knowledge and also because of her differentiated intelligence. The profile of the Egyptian queen, with all these qualities, allow her to conquer two of the most legendary characters in our history, the powerful Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. And, as time went by, Cleopatra's figure was often misrepresented, and the Egyptian woman was seen with prejudice. At times, it seems that her entire life path and conquest boiled down to having seduced these two Romans. But this view of the queen's life is simplistic, since she has had great political achievements. In any case, the legendary Egyptian queen has become a source of inspiration for some of the greatest artists in history. Among them, the painter Michelangelo, William Shakespeare. In their hands, the ruler became an illustrious piece of art. As we learn more about her story, we realize it's not by chance that Cleopatra has fascinated so many people in her time and continues to captivate so many others in this day and age.